The final season of Stranger Things has arrived. It took so long that some fans started aging faster than the kids on the show. The last time we visited Hawkins was 3 years ago, which, let's be honest, feels like a whole geological era in internet time. Naturally, a ton has faded from memory. So before we march into the grand finale fully armed and mentally caffeinated, let's refresh the key event of all previous seasons, especially season 4, since its shadow looms over the new one like Vecna over a poor soul who forgot to stretch before levitated. So, the date, November 6, 1983. 4 12-year-old boys living in the small town of Hawkins, Indiana are playing Dungeons & Dragons. Fun fact, the show will later borrow heavily from this game's mythology to explain all the weird supernatural nonsense and to name basically every nightmare creature that crawls out of the Upside Down. After their campaign is abruptly interrupted by the mother of their dungeon master, Mike Wheeler, the boys pack up and head home. Well, almost everyone makes it back safely, except Will Byers, who vanishes without a trace like he just unlocked the world's worst speedrun glitch. If you rewatch the very first episode carefully, you can spot a suspiciously familiar silhouette that flashes by for a split second right before Will disappears. Back then, it felt like a random spooky cameo, but after season 4, it pours a whole gas can of fuel onto fan theories. Classic Stranger Things. Hide the clues first, explain them when everyone already lost their sanity. Meanwhile, in a nearby research lab, a mysterious girl with telekinetic powers, a tattoo of 11 on her arm, and the social skills of someone raised by microwave ovens escapes confinement. At the same time, Will's mom Joyce doesn't immediately realize her son is missing, but once it hits her, she powers through panic and borderline madness, determined to find him, no matter how many Christmas lights have to be sacrificed in the process. Will's friends launch their own rescue mission, but instead of their lost buddy, they stumble upon 11 in the woods. Mike brings her home convinced she can help find Will, especially after she recognizes him in a photo like she just spotted her favorite Pokemon. Then comes the big blow. Police, led by Chief Jim Hopper, find a body that everyone assumes is Will's. They even hold a public funeral, but the boys refuse to believe it because 11 proves she can communicate with Will, and he's very much not dead yet. Joyce and Hopper team up to save Will and break into the lab, where all their wild conspiratorial suspicions turn out to be 100% accurate. Will, as it turns out, is trapped in the Upside Down, essentially a nightmarish alternative dimension that looks like Hawkins, but with a heavy do not enter vibe. While the town spirals into panic, an entire lab strike team hunts down the escaped test subject. The group is led by Dr. Brenner, who has the warm, comforting aura of a malfunctioning Roomba with daddy issues. And as if that wasn't enough chaos, another thing escapes the lab. A humanoid, bloodthirsty creature the kids nicknamed the Demogorgon. Basically the worst Pokemon evolution imaginable. The name Demogorgon, as you probably guessed, is borrowed straight from Dungeons & Dragons. And it's not just a cute nod. Will actually fought a Demogorgon in the game on the very night he vanished, so the parallel hits harder than Steve's hairspray addiction. The creature is responsible for a whole buffet of casualties in season 1, but eventually 11 confronts it head on. The two clash, unleash some supernatural WWE energy, and then both vanish without a trace. Meanwhile, during that showdown, Hopper and Joyce break into the Upside Down and rescue Will. The boys reunite, roll their dice again, and pretend life is normal, even though Will is clearly not the same kid he used to be. And of course, Mike is suffering from advanced I Miss 11 syndrome. At the start of season 2, we learned that after the disappearance, 11 got trapped in the Upside Down again. When she finally clawed her way back into our world, she found refuge with Hopper, who hid her from the evil lab scientist in his old cabin like she was a super-powered woodland cryptid. 11 goes on her own personal side quest arc, but by the end, she reunites with the Hawkins squad. Seasons 1 and 2 reveal that her mother was a test subject in a secret CIA program during pregnancy, which expanded 11's abilities before she was even born. After birth, she was kidnapped and raised in a lab, where they trained her to be the ultimate spy, a kid who could eavesdrop on America's enemies without even leaving her chair. She wasn't the only child with powers. During her escape, she meets another superpowered kid in Chicago, basically a crossover episode nobody expected. At the same time, the show dives deep into Will's trauma. We discover the Mind Flayer had latched onto him, gaining access to his thoughts and turning him into an unwilling Wi-Fi hotspot for evil. They exorcise the creature using heat, because apparently the Upside Down monsters have the same tolerance for warmth as a cheap laptop. But instead of leaving reality, the Mind Flayer remains in the real world. Dustin, meanwhile, adopts a baby Demogorgon because why wouldn't you keep a murder tadpole as a pet, and forges an unexpected bromance with Steve. The group also levels up with a new party member, Max, a red-haired skater girl who quickly becomes a key hero. Her brother Billy stands out as well, mostly by being aggressively unhinged and acting as a secondary antagonist. Max and Lucas slowly fall for each other, and she later befriends 11 after they settle a few minor superpower disagreements. The season ends with the gang fighting off demon dogs and 11 slamming the door to the Upside Down shut, metaphorically and literally, like someone rage quitting a cursed Zoom call. In Season 3, most of the chaos unfolds inside the brand new Starcourt Mall, where Steve works alongside his new co-worker, Robin. It's basically the most 80s location imaginable. Neon lights, food courts, and the occasional Soviet secret base underneath. Normal mall stuff. Turns out, the Soviet Union is also trying to access the Upside Down for its own totally not a bad idea purposes. Spoiler, they're terrible at it. Even worse than the Americans, which is impressive. The Mind Flayer, still alive and very cranky, becomes an even bigger threat. Literally. It evolves into a massive, squishy meat monster made of fused human bodies, which is somehow even nastier than it sounds. After possessing Billy, it grows stronger by absorbing more Hawkins residents and sets its sights on 11, and she's the one person capable of slamming the door to the Upside Down shut. While the kids face off against this colossal nightmare creature, Hopper, Joyce, and their newly acquired Chaos agent Murray attempt to close the Soviet gate hidden beneath the mall. During the massive showdown, they manage to defeat the Mind Flayer. Billy sacrifices himself, 11 loses her powers, and Hopper's presumed dead, as in exploded into plot dust. In the finale, the Byers family decides to wipe the Hawkins curse off their shoes and move away, taking 11 with them. And then we jump into Season 4, which unfolds across two different timelines. One explores past events that happened before 11's escape in Season 1, and even earlier. The other follows the present-day storyline. We learned that in 1979, 4 years before her breakout, 11 befriended a lab worker named Henry Creel. He convinced her to destroy the implant in her necks if they could escape together. But, plot twist, Henry turns out to be Brenner's very first test subject, blessed with terrifying supernatural powers. He also has a tattoo on his wrist, 001, which, in hindsight, is the world's biggest red flag disguised as a number. After 11 freed him, Henry immediately went full final boss speedrun and started slaughtering everyone in the lab. In the end, she was the only one capable of overpowering him and blasting him straight into the Upside Down. From that moment on, Henry studied this parallel world, nurtured enough resentment to power a small city, and eventually learned to manipulate every major villain we've seen so far, including the Mind Flayer itself. In the present timeline, we meet Eddie, the metalhead legend who runs the Hellfire Club, a group of D&D enthusiasts that includes several of our main characters. Eddie becomes the unlucky witness to the first murder committed by the new villain, Vecna. Naturally, the police don't believe a supernatural boogeyman, so they immediately start hunting Eddie instead. Classic Justice System moment. Meanwhile, Hawkins residents continue dying horrific deaths, and Max ends up on Vecna's radar. She's still struggling with Billy's death and her parents' divorce. Emotional baggage Vecna apparently treats like a VIP invitation. He specifically targets victims with deep psychological trauma. Nancy and Robin investigate all of this at a psychiatric ward where they meet Victor Creel. They initially think he's the killer, but it turns out he was telling the truth all along about being tormented by something otherworldly. He survived because he listened to his favorite music. Proof that a good playlist is stronger than therapy and holy water combined. This clue helps Max break out of Vecna's trance and survive for a while. Eventually, she's brought to the brink of death and ends up in a coma, where she remains at the start of Season 5. While this is happening, 11 reunites with Dr. Brenner to regain her powers through Project Nina. By reliving her repressed memories, she gradually pieces together the true history of the lab. She learns Henry's entire story, including the fact that he is Vecna. Victor Creel is his father, and Henry believes his grand mission was to cleanse the world, starting with his own family. He overestimated his power, collapsed, and was later taken by Brenner to become the infamous Test Subject 1. 11 regains her abilities just in time. Meanwhile, Hopper turns out to be alive, just chilling in a top-secret Soviet prison. With help from a sympathetic guard and a smuggler, he gets a message to Joyce. She teams up with Murray, and the two head off to Alaska like it's the strangest vacation package ever sold. At the prison, inmates are forced to fight a chained Demogorgon. During the chaos, Hopper manages to decapitate the monster, because apparently that's just another Tuesday for him, and he reunites with Joyce. On their way back home, they discover that the Soviets have an entire laboratory dedicated to studying creatures from the Upside Down. Because why stop at one terrible idea when you can have an entire collection? In the finale, the heroes take down Vecna across literally all dimensions. Eddie goes out like a true legend, sacrificing himself to distract the big bad. Max suffers horrific injuries. Steve and the crew manage to burn Vecna, but of course, he slips away in classic villain survives fashion. The ending of Season 4 is bittersweet, not the clean final punctuation of previous seasons, but more like a prologue teasing the real conclusion. By the time we roll into Season 5, gates have started opening at multiple points around Hawkins, and the Upside Down is bleeding into the real world. 11 has become a top priority target for the government, who blame her for the very existence of the Upside Down and all the supernatural chaos since 1983. Will feels a stronger than ever connection with Vecna, and judging by the trailers, he might turn into the series' main villain, since he's apparently been acting as a conduit all along. Theories about how the story will end are running wild. Some fans speculate Eddie could return as a vampire, or that a time loop could reset events back to the first night of D&D. There are even hints sprinkled across previous seasons suggesting the Upside Down might be frozen in time. The idea is that by defeating Vecna, the heroes could literally go back in time, undoing past horrors, saving hundreds of Hawkins residents, and letting good triumph over evil for once and for all. Anyway, over the next month, we'll finally see how Stranger Things wraps up, and of course, we'll break down every jaw-dropping detail. Meanwhile, drop your expectations for the final season in the comments, and maybe share your survival guide for waiting until the second half.